One of the most contentious dimensions of globalization today is the process of migration. In our globalizing world, many of us tend to go into places where the capital is higher, the opportunities are much more sure, and the way of living is better. Pero, is it really worth it? Mas maganda nga ba talaga ang buhay kapag nag-migrate tayo? So, magandang umaga sa ating lahat. I am Monday Decembros R. de la Cruz, and we will be discussing Chapter 8, Global Flows of Migrants. Ang content ng chapter na ito ay una ang migrants, susunod ang migration, under niya dito ang flows of migrant to and from the United States, undocumented Mexican migrants to the United States, increased law enforcement, flows of migrants into and within Europe, Brexit and British EU migration, undocumented migration across the Mediterranean into Europe, flows of migrants in Asia, the case against the backlash to undocumented or illegal immigration, remittances at last ang diaspora. So ayan, let's proceed. Migrants. For sure, familiar naman na tayo sa mga kamag-anak natin na umaalis papunta ng ibang bansa, either para magtrabaho, sila tito, tita natin ganyan. Lumilipad sa example sa Dubai para mag-ipon ng pera para may maipadala sa atin. So ayun, ano nga ba ang mga migrants? So according dito, migrants, any person who lives temporarily or permanently in a country where he or she was not born and has acquired some significant social ties to this country. So ang pag-usapan pala natin dito ay ang international migration. Since we are focusing on the global flows of migrants, so nag-occur din kasi ang migration within a country. Pero dito, international ang pag-uusapan natin. As of 2017, ang UN or United Nations estimates that there are 258 million international migrants, about 3.4% of the world population. Ang iba nagsasabi na malaki daw ang number na ito since noong 2000 ay 173 million and noong 2010 ay 220 million lamang. Ang iba naman ay lower ang migration flows today dahil than they were before the World War I. And then, sabi dito, Europe and Asia are the largest regions attracting new international migrants, but the United States remain the country with the largest migrant population. In 2017 daw, there were 49.8 million people who are foreign-born, 15% of the total U.S. population, and 19% of the total international migrant population. So, ang U.S. to Mexico corridor is also the world's largest route for international migrants. So, other large migrants population include Germany, France, United Kingdom, and yung oil-producing countries our nation such as Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, and Bangladesh. So, migrants today are more likely of working age. So, anong edad nga ba ang working age? Ito ay 15 to 64 years old. Noong 2017 ulit, 74% ng international migrants were of working age compared to only 57% of the population broadly. Itong pagtaas ng working population ay tumutulong daw ito to increase the dependency ratio. So, ang ibig sabihin ng dependency ratio ay a relationship between the working population na economically productive and sa mga dependent age groups tulad ng 14 below at ang 65 pataas. So, pinapababa niya daw yun. From 2000 to 2015, Europe would have fallen if it were not for international migration. So that data seems a bit alarming kasi ang working age pala ay 15 to 64. 'Di ba? Para masyadong bata ang 15 years old to be working under a working class. So, at the same time, migrant pa siya. Sa discussion natin ng migration ay naantala dahil nga sa mahirap i-track ang population flows. Bakit? Dahil dito. Number 1, many countries do not collect such data. Number 2, those that do collect data often don't report them to international agencies. Number 3, population flows are defined differently in different countries. There are also differences in how they define the permanency of a move and the residency period required for migrant status. Number 4, few countries keep track of their expatriates. And lastly, there are overwhelming difficulties in keeping tabs on undocumented migrants.
Now let's proceed to migration. Migration can be defined as the movement of people from one country either to live temporarily or permanently to another country. Unlike trade, finance, investment, yung restriction ng migration ng tao lalo sa labor migration ay hindi liberalized dahil sinasabi na in order to prosper economically, a nation must try to keep the labor it needs, either highly paid professionals or low-paid semi-skilled and unskilled workers. Kapag kasi yung isang bansa ay nawalan ng malaking bilang ng mga workers, maaaring yung capability nila na mag-compete globally ay mabawasan. Then, usually, nagkakaroon ng conflict between sa mga newcomers and dun sa mga dati nang nandoon. Kaya naman, yung mga nation, mas prefer nila na i-maintain yung barriers ng migration. Yung isang example nito is yung sa US and European nations na kung saan, ito yung sa time ni Donald Trump, na kung saan pinatuloy niya yung ban on immigration from Muslim majority countries para iwasan yung terorismo. It is also important to note that the other barriers have been reduced in terms of movement. Between certain countries such European Union nations from North American Free Trade Agreement, reduce restriction between US, Canada, and Mexico for business executives and highly skilled workers. Since many of these barriers created by nation-states, it is clear that yung lahat ng yun ay produkto ng Westphalian area. Di ba yun yung era na kung saan yung mga tao ay nakakagalaw geographic space fairly freely. But with the rise of the nation-state, much more notice was taken of such movement and many more barriers were erected to limit and control it. However, nung late 19th century, there was still much freedom of movement, which is yung sa Great Atlantic Migration from Europe to US. Estimated na 50 million people yung umalis ng Europe for US between 1820 to late 19th century. Then nung World War I, yung mga nation-state naman nagsimula na mag-impose ng drastic restriction sa global movement ng mga tao. Then nagkaroon din ng variation between nation-state na kung saan yung walang single state na nag-a-allow ng free access sa lahat ng mga immigrants. However, while authorized migration is restricted in various ways, nagkaroon pa rin ng unauthorized immigration. Yung ibang nation, mayroon silang batas para tumanggap ng mga refugees na tumakas sa gera and also yung mga galing sa political persecution. Now, global dispersion. Global dispersion makes it easier to find out about and become comfortable in a host country. Then nagkaroon din ng mga interaction of global or local networks na kung saan either formal or informal social networks ay siyang naging dahilan para mas maging madali na mag-migrate at maging komportable sa bagong settings or sa paligid yung mga tao. But then, migration policies have not been liberalized dahil mayroong selective reduction sa barriers to migration in many countries. This was driven by various factors such as labor shortage, the needs of multinational corporations, aging population, new tax revenues offered by migrants, which can be used to help support the state welfare system. Now, a combination of push and pull factors are used to explain migration. What is push factors? Push factors are the motivation of the migrants' contextual issues in the home country. Example of this is unemployment or low pay that make it difficult or impossible for them to achieve their goals there, and major disruption such as war, famine, political persecution, and economic depression. While naman yung pull factors, it includes a favorable immigration policy in the host country, which higher pay and lower unemployment, formal and informal networks that cater to migrants, labor shortage, and similarly in language and culture between home and host countries. So, ano nga ba yung tinatawag nating refugees? Refugees are those who are forced to leave their homeland or live involuntarily because they fear for their safety. Then next we have asylum seekers, which they flee refugees who seek to remain in their country to which they flee. In 2017, nagkaroon ng 25.9 million refugees and asylum seekers in 2016 who are documented and undocumented. Sinasabi na yung mga refugees na to and asylum seekers are from Turkey, Jordan, State of Palestine, and Lebanon. Then we have the flows of migrants to and from United States. Undocumented Mexican migrants to United States. Noong 2017, 15% of 49.8 million US citizens are immigrants. Approximately 11.3 million are undocumented na nanggaling sa China, El Salvador, and Philippines. Half of the 11.3 million are the Mexicans. Yun nga yun, sinasabi na yung largest number ay nanggaling sa Mexico. In fact, noong 2016, about 5.6 million of Mexicans ay nasa US nang walang authorization. However, life is not easy for undocumented Mexicans immigrants to US. Kahit na sabihin na mas nag-improve yung buhay nila compare nung nasa Mexico sila, ay naging problematic pa din ito in a way na yung situation nila has improved from economic point of view but they remain largely marginal economically in the US context. Then their family life is often enshrouded with many family members and friends are still in Mexico. Then lastly, those who are in the United States without authorization are hunted by the possibility of being apprehended by the immigration authorities. Yet, mas marami pa rin sa kanila yung nagsasabi na kahit na ganun, mas maganda pa rin yung buhay nila dun sa US kumpara nung dun sa buhay nila sa Mexico. Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals or DACA. It is a program na kung saan yung mga bata na dinadala ng parents nila sa US without authorization ay kailangang mag-apply para sa temporary legal status. And according to Department of Homeland Security, a person could qualify for DACA if they met these requirements. Yun nga, yung requirements dito is yung mga listed, which is yung younger than 31 years old as of June 15, 2012, arriving to the United States before their 16th birthday, continuous residence in the United States since June 15, 2007, being in school, having graduated or having been honorably discharged from armed forces, not having been convicted of misdemeanor, a felony, significant only for a 2-year period. DACA has helped 700,000 young immigrants and mostly of them are Mexicans. They are also referred as the Dreamers, which means to build lives without being deported. In the late 2017, Donald Trump announced to end the DACA, and the future of Dreamers became uncertain. But then, through series of political maneuver and court challenges, negotiation for extending program and providing Dreamers a pathway to a citizenship has continued. An example of this was the immigrant life of Cesar Montalongo. He is Mexican from Las Cruces, Mexico, who got 4.0 GPA and holds a 3-degree holder and also graduated with Latin honor. He couldn't find any employment due to being undocumented immigrant. Then, when yung DACA ay yung na-introduce siya noong 2012, nakita ni Cesar to na opportunity para mag-apply sa medical school na Stritch School of Medicine in Loyola University na sa Chicago. But then he said, it was like I have to do very well on this test, but at the same time, all these things are happening that are going to make my life very hard and uncertain. So, yung dream niya na parang maging isang doktor ay naging uncertain dahil doon. So, next naman is yung increased law enforcement. President Trump's expand border patrols, increased deportation effort, and began plans for his promised border wall between U.S. and Mexico. It said that across 2,000 miles of the U.S.-Mexico, there are already 650 miles of the fence to prevent people from crossing without authorization. Another strategy na ginawa nila para ma-secure yung borders is nag-involve sila ng drone program na kung saan yung drone program na yun ay nagko-cost siya ng $62.5 million. Then in the year 1990, tunnels have become so common halt dahil yung mga bahay at mga building ay masyadong malapit sa fences. Ginawa itong way ng mga Mexican para mas marami yung makapasok at makalabas sa tunnel sa pinakamadaling paraan. Another strategy is yung increased border patrols and deportation in the year 2016. Interior deportation increased by 25%, which is from 65,332 ay naging 81,603. However, the total number of apprehension is 144,516, which is lower than the Obama's early years in office. In fact, it is the lowest since 1971. The total deportation peaked in 2012, which is equivalently to 409,849. Increased law enforcement, the irony. Migrants today are more likely to be able to get jobs outside of the agricultural sector. Such work is less seasonal and more likely to be regular and stable. Second, many are moving beyond the southwestern border states and deeper into United States, making a return to Mexico and more difficult and more expensive. Third, with the tightening of border control since 1980s and especially after the 9/11 and the election of Trump, it is simply more difficult and more expensive to find a way to return to Mexico. Then, in the year 1979 to 1984, about 47% are the undocumented immigrants have returned. In 1984 to 2003, 27% of the undocumented immigrants have returned. The longer the immigrant to stay in the U.S., the lower the probability that they will live.